During a visit to a quiet northern village, Elara discovers a bundle of lost letters addressed to her but written decades earlier by lovers Lydia and Thomas, separated by war and silence. As she uncovers their story hidden in the rain, Elara finds herself entangled in a mystery of love, memory, and fate, learning that some connections transcend both time and loss.
The rain tapped softly against the window panes of the small post office, a steady rhythm that matched the slow pulse of the village outside. Elara stood just inside the doorway, the salty breeze weaving through the cracks in the weathered wood, carrying with it the scent of seaweed and distant storms. The post office was nearly deserted, its once bright paint now peeling, the sign above the door faded and cracked. Dust motes floated in the dim light that filtered through the grimy windows, casting a muted glow over the cluttered interior. Elara brushed a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear and glanced around the room. Boxes of misplaced mail lay scattered on the floor, some unopened, others yellowed with age. The walls were lined with rusting metal bins and shelves burdened with forgotten parcels. The place felt like a time capsule, a relic caught between past and present, much like the village itself. She moved cautiously, her boots creaking on the worn wooden floorboards as she made her way toward the back corner. There, half hidden beneath a pile of old newspapers and tangled string, was a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The paper was brittle, edges curled and stained, but the ink was still legible. Her heart quickened as she knelt and carefully lifted the bundle into her hands. Turning it over, Elara noticed the delicate handwriting on the topmost envelope. It was addressed simply to Elara, my future love. Her breath caught. The name was hers, yet the letters were clearly decades old. The mystery stirred something deep inside her, a blend of curiosity and an almost aching sense of connection she couldn't explain. She sat down on a dusty crate, the bundle resting gently on her lap. With trembling fingers, she untied the ribbon and carefully unfolded the first letter. The paper crackled softly, the words flowing across the page in fluid cursive strokes that spoke of longing, hope, and a love kept alive despite the cruel distance of time and circumstance. Outside, the sky darkened with the gathering storm, and the rain whispered secrets against the glass. Elara looked up, her gaze drawn to the quiet village, beyond the narrow streets slick with rain, the shuttered windows of quaint cottages, the lonely lighthouse standing sentinel over the restless sea. The silence felt heavy, as if the village itself was holding its breath, guarding stories long buried beneath layers of forgetfulness. A sudden sound startled her, a soft clearing of a throat behind her. She turned to see Ellie, the post office manager, standing hesitantly in the doorway. His graying hair was damp from the mist, and his eyes held a tired resignation. "I didn't expect anyone here today," he said quietly, stepping inside. "This place hasn't seen much use in years." Elara nodded, holding up the letters. "I found these. They readdressed to me." "But they re so old, how could that be?" Ellie's expression darkened, and he glanced away toward the rain-streaked window. "The mail system here. It hasn't been reliable for a long time. Letters got lost, misplaced. Sometimes they never made it to their destination." She looked back down at the fragile pages, feeling the weight of forgotten stories pressing against her chest. "I want to know who wrote them, and why they were never delivered." For a moment, Ellie said nothing. Then he nodded slowly, a reluctant understanding dawning in his eyes. "This village has its secrets," he said softly. "Some better left alone. But maybe it's time someone listens." Elara's grip tightened on the letters. As the rain pattered steadily outside, a quiet resolve blossomed within her. She would uncover the story hidden in these pages, wherever it might lead. For in the faded ink and whispered words, she sensed a connection that transcended time, a love story waiting to be told, and a past ready to be remembered. She rose, clutching the bundle close. The path ahead was uncertain, shadowed by silence and loss, but for the first time in years, Elara felt a flicker of something she had long forgotten: hope. The letters, hidden away in the northern rain, had found their way to her at last, and with them, a journey was about to begin. Outside, the first flash of lightning illuminated the village, casting long shadows that seemed to reach across the decades, linking past and present, memory and longing, fate and the fragile promise of new beginnings. Elara stepped out into the cool air, the rain falling softly around her. She looked up at the grey skies, the steady rhythm of the northern rain echoing in her heart. Somewhere in those lost letters lay a story waiting to be uncovered, and she was determined to listen. The unopened letters were no longer forgotten. They were alive once more, and so was the quiet village, stirring slowly from its long-held silence. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm by the time Elara found herself alone in the dim light of the abandoned post office. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and salt from the sea breeze sneaking in through the cracked window panes. Carefully, she unfolded the first letter from the bundle she'd discovered the day before, a fragile sheet of cream-colored paper, its edges softened by decades of neglect. The handwriting was elegant, looping with a tenderness that seemed almost fragile, like the author was imbuing each word with hope and desperation at once. Elara's eyes moved slowly across the page, absorbing the heartfelt words penned by Lydia, a young woman who spoke of a love that had been interrupted by war and circumstance. Lydia's voice, as revealed through the letter, was passionate and hopeful, painting vivid images of the sea, where she and Thomas had shared stolen moments. The brightness of her eyes, and the gentle smile that lingered in her memories. As Elara read, she felt the air around her thicken with the weight of unspoken emotions. The letters weren't just words, they were echoes from a time long past, yet they vibrated with a timeless ache that resonated deep within her. Lydia's longing for Thomas, a fisherman taken by the call of duty, was palpable. Every sentence seemed soaked in the salt air of the village, in the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs, and in the silence left by a love stretched across impossible distances. The post office, usually a place of mundane routine, had transformed into a quiet sanctuary where the past whispered its secrets. Elara's heartbeat quickened as she moved to the next letter, Thomas's reply. His handwriting was more hesitant, marked by the tension between his loyalty to duty and his yearning to return to Lydia. His words revealed a man torn, caught between the sea that had been his home and the woman who anchored his heart. The contrast between the two voices, the fiery hope of Lydia and the earnest conflict of Thomas, wove a tapestry of emotions that left Elara breathless. She paused. The letter pressed softly to her chest as the distant cries of gulls and the steady pulse of the rain became a background hum to the vivid world the letters had conjured. For a moment, the village outside seemed suspended in time, its quiet streets and weathered cottages holding their breath in reverence to the story unfolding in her hands. Turning the pages slowly, Elara noticed subtle details, Lydia's references to the village's landmarks, the mention of a small cove where they had once met, and the fleeting hope threaded through every word that they would be reunited. It was a hope that Elara recognized not just as a relic of the past, but as a mirror to her own hidden longings. The final letter in the bundle arrived like a whispered secret, delivered by the flickering light of the old lamp that cast shadows dancing on the cracked walls. Lydia's words were a blend of resignation and fierce love, a testament to a bond that distance and fate had strained but not broken. Elara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, an unexpected tenderness blooming within her guarded heart. In that quiet, rain-soaked room, the voices of Lydia and Thomas ceased to be just words on paper. They became living memories, a testament to the enduring power of love that transcends time and loss. Elara's fingers traced the faded ink as her mind spun with questions. Who had these letters been meant for, and why had they remained hidden for so long? Most pressing of all was the curious detail that the letters were addressed to her, to a future self she had not yet lived. The weight of the discovery settled around her like the rain outside, a gentle but insistent call to uncover the story that had been buried beneath years of silence. Elara's thoughts drifted to her own life, her recent return to the village, the distance she had maintained from those around her, and the fear she carried deep within her of being left behind. Lydia and Thomas's love, so vividly alive in these letters, stirred something long dormant in Elara, a fragile hope that connection was still possible, even across the gulf of years and loss. She closed the last letter gently, her breath shallow and her heart heavy yet strangely buoyant. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle, the grey sky hinting at the promise of dawn. Elara knew that these letters were not just relics of a forgotten past, they were the first step on a journey she could no longer avoid. The echoes from the past had found her, and with them, a chance to understand not only Lydia and Thomas but herself as well. As she stood to leave, the soft rustle of paper was drowned by the distant roll of thunder, a reminder that the story was far from over. Elara glanced back once more at the bundle, now the most precious thing she had ever held. With a quiet resolve, she tucked the letters into her coat and stepped out into the rain-washed streets, the village holding its secrets close but ready, perhaps, to finally let them go. The journey to uncover the truth had begun, and with it, the promise that some loves, no matter how lost to time, could still find their way home. The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle as I made my way along the narrow path leading to Mara's cottage. The coastal wind tugged at my scarf and whispered through the aged pines that stood sentinel along the road. I clutched the bundle of unopened letters closer, their delicate paper seeming almost fragile against the damp chill in the air. It was strange the way these letters had called to me, pulling me back to this quiet village that I had left behind for so many years. Mara's cottage was a beacon of warmth amid the grey skies. The soft glow of lamplight spilled through the curtained window, promising comfort and stories long held in the folds of time. As I stepped inside, the scent of dried herbs and worn wood wrapped around me like an old shawl. Mara sat by the window in her favorite rocking chair, the steady click of her knitting needles punctuating the quiet room. Elara, she greeted me with a smile that crinkled the corners of her wise eyes. "Come in, child. You look like you've brought the storm with you." I placed the letters carefully on the worn kitchen table, the bundle's yellowed edges catching the light. Mara's gaze drifted to them, her expression softening with recognition. "Those," she said quietly, "are whispers from a past many have tried to forget." I sank into the chair across from her, the wood creaking beneath me. "I found them in the old post office," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. Addressed to me though they were written decades ago. I can't stop thinking about who wrote them and why. Mara nodded slowly. "This village holds many stories, Elara. Some are bright as the summer sun, others shadowed by the storms of war and loss. These letters, they belong to Lydia and Thomas. Two souls torn apart by forces beyond their control." I felt the weight of her words settle in my chest, a mixture of sadness and intrigue blooming within me. "Can you tell me more?" Her hands paused in their rhythm as she reached for a faded map pinned to the wall. The paper was brittle, creased with age, but Mara's fingers traced the familiar outlines of the village and its surroundings with reverence. "This," she said, pointing to a small cove where the sea met the cliffs, "is where Thomas used to fish before he was drafted. And here," she tapped another spot near the old mill, "is where Lydia would wait, hoping to see his boat on the horizon." Her voice wavered slightly, as if touching memories both sweet and painful. They were young, full of hope. But the war changed everything. Letters like these were their only lifeline, though many never reached their destination. I opened my small notebook, its pages blank but eager to be filled. The scratch of my pen felt steady, a tether to the past as I recorded Mara's stories alongside the letter's words. Outside, the rain softened, the rhythm of droplets against the window syncing with the pulse of the village's hidden heart. "I want to understand," I confessed, "not just their story but what it means for me and for this place. Mara's eyes met mine, filled with a warmth that was both a balm and a challenge. Then listen closely. Elara, the village's memory is fragile. It needs someone to hold its threads together before they unravel completely. As the evening deepened, Mara shared tales of village festivals long past, of laughter mingled with tears, and promises whispered beneath the northern rain. Each story wove a tapestry of life that stretched across generations, binding me to a past I had never known but now felt irrevocably a part of. The night grew quiet save for the occasional call of a distant owl and the lullaby of waves crashing against the shore. I closed my notebook, heart heavy yet lightened by the connection I was beginning to forge. The letters were no longer mere paper and ink. They were living echoes of love and loss, memory and hope. Before I left, Mara pressed a hand to my cheek, her voice a gentle murmur in the dark. Remember, Elara, sometimes the past is the key to unlocking the future. Walking back through the misty village streets, I felt the rain settle softly on my skin, as if blessing the path ahead. The threads of memory were pulling me forward. Weaving a story, I was now determined to tell one of love hidden in the northern rain, waiting patiently to be found. The day was an unrelenting wash of grey, the kind of northern rain that seeped into every corner of the village, draping it in a quiet sorrow. Elara found herself standing before the old post office once again, the building's weathered facade a testament to years of neglect. The once bright red paint was now faded and peeling, flakes drifting down like forgotten memories. The heavy wooden door creaked in protest as she pushed it open, the smell of damp paper and dust greeting her like an old ghost. Inside, the silence was absolute. Rows of rusted mailboxes lined the walls, their doors hanging ajar or missing entirely. Puddles reflected the feeble light filtering through grimy windows, and the air held a chill that seemed to press down on her chest. This place, once a hub of connection and communication, now felt like a tomb for the village's forgotten stories. Elara's fingers brushed over a cracked counter, and for a moment she imagined the bustle of days long past, the hurried sorting of letters, the exchange of news, the laughter and whispered secrets. But now, only silence remained. It was a silence that spoke volumes, one that seemed to warn her away, reminding her that some stories were best left buried. Determined to push past the weight of this stillness, Elara stepped back into the rain and made her way to Ruth's shop. The bell above the door chimed softly as she entered, the warm scent of wood smoke and aged paper wrapping around her like a fragile comfort. Ruth looked up from behind the counter, her eyes narrowing briefly before softening with reluctant recognition. "Back again, Elara." Ruth's voice was low, edged with a caution that mirrored the wary glances she cast toward the door. "I'm trying to understand," Elara said quietly. "About the letters, the village. What happened here?" Ruth hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. "Some things aren't meant to be stirred up," she murmured. "People have their reasons for keeping silent." Elara nodded, sensing the unspoken weight behind Ruth's words. The villagers' reluctance was not mere forgetfulness, it was protection, a shield against old wounds that still ached beneath the surface. Leaving the shop, Elara wandered the rain-soaked streets, the persistent drizzle muffling the sound of her footsteps. Faces turned away as she passed, eyes downcast or fixed on distant points beyond her reach. The village seemed trapped in an unspoken pact, a collective amnesia that guarded its secrets fiercely. Her next visit was to Ali at the post office. The man looked as worn as the building he managed, his eyes shadowed with frustration. "The system's broken," he admitted bitterly, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Letters lost, connections severed. It's a tragedy, but no one wants to face it." Elara felt a flicker of hope amid the despair. If Ellie's anger was any indication, perhaps the village's silence was not impenetrable. Perhaps, with enough persistence, the stories trapped in the shadows could finally come to light. As the rain continued to fall, Elara stood once more beneath the peeling eaves of the post office, the droplets tracing patterns on the cracked pavement. The village's silent past pressed around her, heavy and unyielding, but so did her determination. Somewhere within this silence was the truth, the story of Lydia and Thomas, of love lost and hope deferred, and Elara was resolved to find it, no matter the cost. The night closed in, the rain's steady rhythm a haunting lullaby that whispered of memories long buried and the fragile hope that some loves, some stories, might yet endure beyond the distance and time that sought to erase them. Yet as the darkness deepened, Elara could not shake the feeling that the village itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if she would break the silence or become just another secret swallowed by the northern rain. And with that thought lingering in her mind, she turned away from the post office, stepping into the shadows of the quiet streets, ready to face whatever truths awaited her. The rain tapped softly against the window pane, a gentle percussion that matched the quiet rhythm of the old post office. Elara sat alone, the amber light of a single lamp illuminating the fragile bundle of letters resting on her lap. She unfolded the topmost envelope with reverence, careful not to disturb the faded ink that had survived the decades. The handwriting was elegant, curling and looping in a way that betrayed the passion of its author, Lydia. Elara's eyes scanned the words, her voice barely above a whisper as she read aloud. "My dearest Thomas, the days stretch endlessly without you, yet my heart holds fast to the hope of your return. The sea's relentless whisper reminds me of your promise, and I cling to it like a lifeline." A shiver ran down her spine, not from the chill in the room but from the raw emotion captured in the letter. Lydia's words painted a picture of a woman whose spirit refused to be broken by distance or uncertainty. Elara imagined Lydia's bright eyes that gleamed with an unwavering light amidst the darkness of separation, and the gentle smile that must have comforted Thomas in his loneliest moments. The letters were more than mere words. They were windows into a love that had transcended time, a testament to resilience. Elara found herself leaning closer, the scent of old paper filling her senses, mingling with the faint saltiness carried on the evening breeze from the nearby coast. Each letter was a thread weaving together the tapestry of Lydia and Thomas's story, and with every line, Elara felt the weight of their longing pressing upon her own heart. Later that afternoon, she made her way to Mara's cottage, the familiar creak of the wooden gate greeting her like an old friend. Inside, the warm glow of the hearth welcomed her, the scent of herbs and aged wood wrapping around her like a comforting shawl. Mara sat by the fire, her silver hair catching the light, eyes sharp yet gentle. Elara presented the letters, watching as Mara's expression softened, a mixture of sorrow and recognition flickering across her face. Together, they pored over the letters, Mara's voice lending history and context as Elara read the fervent declarations of love and hope penned so many years ago. "Lydia was always a force," Mara said quietly, her heart too big for this small village. She loved Thomas fiercely, even when the war took him away. Elara nodded, her fingers tracing the delicate script. "I can almost see her bright eyes, full of life, never giving up." Mara smiled faintly. "That kind of love leaves marks, even on those who come after." As dusk settled, a sudden summer storm unleashed its fury outside, rain pounding against the windows and wind whipping through the narrow streets. Elara stood at the threshold of the post office, clutching a letter to her chest, Lydia's words echoing in her mind. The storm mirrored the turmoil she felt inside, a tempest of emotions stirred by the realization that love, even when separated by distance and fate, could endure. In that moment, Elara confronted the fears she had long buried, the fear of reaching out, of allowing herself to be vulnerable. Lydia's courage inspired her, and she resolved to honor that legacy, to open her heart despite the risks. That night, by the flicker of candlelight, Elara opened her notebook and began to write. Her pen traced the contours of her reflections, capturing the stirring of hope and the ache of longing that Lydia's letters had awakened within her. The silence of the room was profound, yet it was filled with the unspoken promise of new beginnings. And as the northern rain whispered against the glass, Elara felt, for the first time in a long while, that she was not alone. The rain tapped gently against the cracked window pane of the old post office, the soft patter a steady rhythm against the stillness of the room. Elara sat close, the bundle of letters resting on her lap, her fingers tracing the delicate, looping script of Thomas's handwriting. Each word seemed weighted with the gravity of unspoken emotions, a dialogue between duty and desire that stretched across the years like a fragile thread. She unfolded the next letter, the paper brittle but carefully preserved by time. The scent of salt and old ink rose faintly, mingling with the dampness of the coastal air that seeped through the weathered walls. Thomas' voice emerged from the faded lines, earnest and conflicted. He wrote of the sea, its endless horizon, both a promise and a prison. The war had taken him away from the quiet village and from Lydia, the woman whose bright eyes and gentle smile haunted his every thought. Reading his words aloud to herself, Elara felt the ache of his absence. "My dearest Lydia," he began, "the sea calls me as it always has, but now it carries a weight heavier than the nets I once hauled. Duty binds me far from your side, yet every dawn I dream of the day I'll return to you, to the warmth of your hand in mine." The letter trembled in her hands, as if echoing the turmoil within the man who wrote it. Thomas was torn between the obligation imposed by the war and the fierce longing to come home. His letters were more than mere messages. They were confessions, desperate attempts to bridge the distance that fate had cruelly set between him and Lydia. Elara's mind drifted to the village harbour, a place she had often walked alone in the early morning mist. She imagined Thomas standing at the edge of the dock, his strong hands clenched tight, staring toward the horizon with the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. The scent of salt and seaweed, the creak of weathered boats gently rocking, and the distant cries of gulls formed a tapestry of sound and sensation that seemed to enfold his story. She recalled one of Lydia's letters describing Thomas in vivid detail. His hands, calloused from the sea, hold a tenderness that belies their strength. His eyes, deep and sincere, carry the quiet promise of return. The contrast between strength and vulnerability pulled at Elara's heart. It was a mirror of her own guarded nature, the walls she'd built around herself since returning to the village. Here was a man whose duty had forced separation but whose desire transcended distance, a man whose conflicted heart resonated across decades. Elara leaned back, the chair creaking softly beneath her. The room felt colder now, the shadows lengthening as the northern rain intensified. She traced the salt stains on one letter, the edges frayed by years of tears and weather. The weight of unspoken goodbyes and lost chances pressed against her chest, a silent reminder of the village's collective grief and the stories left untold. Her gaze wandered to the empty streets outside, the village cloaked in mist and silence. The abandoned post office, once a hub of connection, now stood as a monument to disconnection and forgotten promises. The failing mail system had swallowed these letters whole, leaving love stranded in limbo. Elara's fingers tightened around the letters as a sudden wave of resolve washed over her. Thomas's conflict was more than a personal tragedy, it was woven into the fabric of the village's history, a silence that had shaped generations. She felt the pull of responsibility, the need to untangle the threads of memory and longing that bound past to present. Later that evening, she wandered down to the harbour, the sky bruised with the last light of day. Empty boats bobbed quietly, their wooden hulls creaking in the soft swell. The mist curled around the docks like a shroud, and the air smelled of brine and forgotten dreams. Elara closed her eyes and let the sounds envelope her, the distant call of the gulls, the gentle slap of water against the pilings, the whisper of the wind weaving through the rigging. In that moment, she felt the weight of absence, the hollow spaces left by those who never returned. Thomas's story was etched into the very soul of the village, a testament to love interrupted but never extinguished. And as she opened her eyes, the rain began again, steady and relentless, a northern rain that seemed to wash away the silence and carry the letter's legacy forward. Back in the post office, Elara carefully placed Thomas's letters back into the bundle, her heart heavy but filled with a newfound empathy. She knew she was no longer just a reader of these lost words, she was becoming a part of their story, charged with the fragile hope of remembering and reconnecting. As the night deepened, she paused by the window, watching the rain trace patterns on the glass. Somewhere beyond the mist, the past and present converged in a quiet dance of fate and longing. The letters whispered truths she could no longer ignore, urging her onward into the shadows of memory and the light of possibility. Elara's journey was far from over, but with each letter, each secret unveiled. She stepped closer to understanding the depths of love and loss that defined the village, and perhaps her own heart as well. The thread of Thomas's conflict wove itself tightly into her own story, a reminder that some distances could only be bridged by courage, vulnerability, and the enduring power of hope. But as she folded the last letter and set it aside, a new question lingered in the air. What had become of Thomas after the war? The answer, buried somewhere in the village's silent past, awaited her discovery. The cottage felt like a sanctuary from the relentless drizzle outside, its walls adorned with faded photographs and handmade quilts, softening the edges of the storm's chill. Elara sat close to the hearth, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows across Mara's lined face. Mara's hands, worn but steady, held a delicate porcelain teacup as she spoke in her calm, measured way about the village's past, weaving fragments of memory that felt both intimate and immense. "This village has always been wrapped in its own kind of silence," Mara said, her voice low but resolute. "Stories get buried beneath the rain and the years. But sometimes those stories find a way to surface when the time is right." Elara listened intently, the letters still fresh in her mind, their fragile paper and heartfelt words echoing through the quiet room. Mara's tales filled in some of the gaps, the war's impact, the struggles of those left behind, and most importantly, the postal system's slow, faltering decline that had turned the village into a place where messages could vanish like whispers in the wind. Encouraged by Mara's warmth and wisdom, Elara felt a burgeoning resolve. If she was to uncover the full story hidden within the letters, she needed to understand the context, the mechanisms that had failed Lydia and Thomas, and the village itself. The next morning, the rain had softened to a gentle mist as Elara made her way to the village historian Jonas. His home was a cluttered sanctuary of the past, a narrow room lined with shelves sagging under the weight of dusty books, brittle newspapers, and fragile maps. The air smelled of old paper and wood polish, a scent that seemed to carry the weight of countless stories waiting to be told. Jonas greeted her with a nod, his spectacles catching the light as he gestured toward a wooden desk piled with documents. "You're the one asking questions about the letters?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. Elara nodded, pulling out the bundle of letters she'd been studying. "I'm trying to understand how they never reached their destination." Jonas shuffled through some files, then pulled out a set of faded postal records. "The system here wasn't always reliable," he explained. "Back then, the post office was understaffed, underfunded. Storms and neglect meant letters were often delayed, sometimes lost altogether." He traced a finger along a yellowed map, pointing to the village's isolated location and the treacherous coastal paths. During the war, it got worse. Many of the postal routes were disrupted, and the village's post office fell into disrepair. Letters like these, well, they might have been left undelivered, forgotten in the chaos. As Elara absorbed this, a mixture of frustration and understanding swirled within her. The letters weren't just lost by chance, they were casualties of a broken system and a village overshadowed by silence. Jonas leaned back, eyes meeting hers with a hint of sympathy. "But knowing this helps. It means there's a reason these letters never reached Lydia or Thomas, and maybe, just maybe, We can find out what happened to them. Leaving Jonas's home, Elara walked slowly through the rain-washed streets. The village felt both familiar and strange, its quiet corners holding secrets she was only beginning to uncover. The weight of the past pressed against her, but beneath it, a spark of hope flickered, a hope that the silence could be broken. That evening, by the soft glow of candlelight, Elara opened her notebook and began to write. Each word was a step forward, a bridge between the lost voices of Lydia and Thomas and her own yearning heart. The scratch of pen on paper was a quiet promise to herself and to the lovers trapped in time that she would not let their story fade away. As the night deepened, Elara paused to listen to the rain tapping against the window pane. It was a sound both mournful and cleansing, a reminder that even in the quietest places, life and love found a way to endure. She closed her notebook with a gentle sigh, her mind racing with possibilities. Tomorrow she would return to the work of piecing together the fragments, of searching for the faces behind the letters and the truths hidden in their words. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Elara felt the stirring of something new, a glimpse of hope. The relentless northern rain fell steadily, a soft, persistent rhythm against the window pane, blurring the world outside into a watercolor of grays and muted greens. Elara sat by the cracked glass of the abandoned post office, the letters spread out before her like fragile petals pressed between the pages of time. Each envelope, yellowed and brittle, bore the gentle curves of Lydia's handwriting, the ink faded but still vibrant with emotion. She traced the lines of a letter with a fingertip, feeling the weight of distance, not just the miles that separated Lydia and Thomas during the war, but something more profound, more etchingly personal. It was the distance she knew all too well, the distance of absence, of silence, of questions left unanswered. Her thoughts drifted inevitably to her own father, a man she had not seen in years. He had left the village when she was just a child, swallowed by his own battles and silence. What had kept them apart? Fear, regret, or simply the cruel march of time and circumstance? The parallel between her fractured past and the letters before her was unmistakable, and it pained her to acknowledge it. Later, wrapped in a thick woolen coat, Elara walked the narrow path that led to the cliffs. The village lay behind her, a scatter of dim lights fading into the mist, while before her stretched the endless sea, grey and restless. The wind tugged at her dark hair, carrying the distant cries of gulls and the salt tang of the ocean. Here, at the edge of the world, she felt the enormity of it, all the vastness that separated lovers, daughters from fathers, past from present. She closed her eyes and let the rain soak through her coat, each drop a reminder of the relentless passage of time. Somewhere, beyond the horizon, Lydia and Thomas had lived their love in letters, their voices whispering across decades. And here she was, caught between their story and her own, struggling to bridge the spaces within her heart. That evening, the warmth of Mara's kitchen was a stark contrast to the chill outside. The old wooden table groaned under the weight of mugs, filled with steaming tea, the rich aroma mingling with the comforting scent of aged wood and worn books. Mara's silver hair caught the soft amber glow of the lamp as she spoke, her voice steady but touched by years of memory. "Distance is a cruel thief, Elara," Mara said gently, pouring tea with practiced ease. "It steals moments, it steals words, and sometimes it steals people altogether. But it also teaches us what we truly hold dear." Elara nodded, sipping the hot liquid, letting the warmth seep into her chilled fingers. "I think I'm beginning to understand," she murmured, "why those letters mean so much. It's not just about Lydia and Thomas. It's about all the spaces between us, between the past and the present, between people who love each other but can't be together." Mara smiled softly, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of stories, and sometimes it's about finding a way to cross those spaces, no matter how wide or how deep. Later, as the clock ticked softly in the quiet room, Elara hesitated before sharing a fragment of her own story, the estrangement from her father. the silence that had stretched between them like an unbridgeable gulf. Mara listened without interruption, her presence a steady anchor. He left to protect himself, I think, Elara whispered, but in doing so, he left me too. And yet, here you are, Mara said, reaching across the table to squeeze Elara's hand. You not lost to that distance. You rebuilding bridges little by little. The words settled around Elara like a balm. She realized then that the letters were more than just relics of a forgotten love. They were a mirror reflecting her own fears and hopes. The motif of distance was not simply a barrier, but a challenge, a call to confront the silence and find connection despite it. That night, as the rain continued its soft descent outside her window, Elara opened her notebook. Her pen moved steadily across the page, capturing thoughts and questions, memories and possibilities. The story of Lydia and Thomas was unfolding not just in the letters, but in the spaces between the lines, spaces that Elara was determined to fill with understanding and hope. The weight of distance was heavy, but it was not insurmountable. And as dawn approached, painting the sky with pale strokes of light, Elara felt a quiet stirring within her, a fragile but growing resolve to face the past, to embrace the present, and to reach toward a future where love might finally cross the boundaries that had kept it apart for so long. Outside, the rain began to ease, leaving behind a world washed clean and waiting. And inside, Elara's heart opened just a little more, ready to step forward into the unknown with courage born of longing and the promise of connection. The warmth of the fire flickered softly in Mara's modest cottage, casting dancing shadows that seemed to reach out and touch the walls lined with mementos of a life lived fully yet quietly. Elara sat close, the worn armchair beneath her a familiar comfort amidst the storm of emotions that had taken hold since discovering the lost letters. The rain outside tapped a steady, soothing rhythm against the window panes, a reminder of the village's ever-present northern weather that seemed to wash away the past, yet never quite succeeded. Mara's hands rested in her lap, fingers curled like the pages of a well-read book. Her silver hair shimmered faintly in the firelight, framing a face both kind and worn by years of unspoken stories. She cleared her throat gently, eyes meeting Elara's with a softness that invited trust. "I suppose it's time I told you," Mara began, her voice low and steady. "There are things I've held back, not out of malice, but out of a need to protect. Sometimes protection comes at a cost." Elara leaned forward, the small notebook she always carried resting on her knees. For months she had been piecing together fragments of the village's past, but Mara's stories promised to fill gaps no letter could reach. "Back when your mother was a girl," Mara continued, "there was a time when this village stood at a crossroads. War had taken many fathers, brothers, lovers, and the wounds it left were not just on skin but on the heart of the community. Lydia and Thomas's story. It wasn't the only one. There were others, secrets that could have shattered us." The fire crackled, sending a brief flare of sparks into the hearth. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming a steady beat that seemed to echo the pounding of Elara's heart. "I made a choice then," Mara said, her gaze distant. "To keep certain truths buried, to silence voices so the village might heal, or at least survive. I believed that was the kindest path." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But kindness can be a heavy burden, and silence, sometimes, is the loudest sound of all." Elara felt the weight of those words settle deep within her. The letters she had found spoke of love and loss, but Mara's confession revealed the shadows behind the light choices made in fear and hope entwined. "Did you ever regret it?" Elara asked softly. Mara nodded slowly. "Every day. But regret is a companion that teaches you the cost of courage. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought in quiet rooms like this, away from the eyes of the world." The room seemed to close in warmly around them, two generations linked by shared pain and newfound understanding. Elara's fingers brushed the edge of her notebook, the pages filled with her reflections and discoveries. Here, in Mara's stories, the village's silent past began to speak. "I don't want to carry that burden alone anymore," Elara whispered. "The letters, the stories, they deserve to be heard, even if it's painful." Mara reached out, placing a gentle hand over Elara's. "You have the strength to do what I could not, to face the past and bring light to the shadows. It won't be easy, my dear, but it will be worth it." A sudden gust rattled the window frames, as if the storm outside acknowledged the turning tide within the cottage. Elara looked up, eyes meeting Mara's steady gaze. The rain softened, its relentless patter easing into a gentle murmur. In that quiet moment, Elara felt the fragile threads of hope weaving through the fabric of regret and memory. The village's stories, once dormant beneath years of silence, were awakening, carried on the northern rain and the courage to remember. As the night deepened, Elara's thoughts turned inward. The sacrifices Mara had made mirrored her own fears about love, connection, and the vulnerability that came with both. But if the past could teach her anything, it was that courage often bloomed in the soil of pain. She closed her notebook with a soft snap, the sound a small but resolute punctuation in the stillness. Tomorrow, she would take the next step, delving deeper into the village's tangled history, guided by Mara's wisdom and the voices that refused to be silenced. Outside, the rain tapered to a whisper, leaving behind the fresh scent of earth and salt. It was a new beginning, fragile but fiercely alive, a promise that even in shadows, there was light waiting to be found. Elara rose, feeling the weight of the past settle alongside a growing strength. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to face whatever truths awaited her. For in the quiet of the northern rain, love and memory had found a way to endure, bridging time and distance in ways she was only beginning to understand. And as she looked back once more at Mara's kind, weathered face, Elara knew that the path forward was not just about uncovering the past, it was about embracing the future, with all its fragile hopes and hidden sorrows. The night held its breath, and so did Elara, poised on the edge of discovery, ready to break the silence that had long defined her home and her heart. The dampness of the coastal air clung to Elara's skin as she crouched low in the dim, musty interior of the abandoned post office. The building, once a bustling hub of connection and communication, was now a hollow shell, its cracked walls and peeling paint whispering stories of neglect and forgotten time. A single bare bulb hung overhead, casting a weak, flickering glow that barely illuminated the worn wooden floor where she knelt. Her fingers trembled slightly as she grasped the edge of a warped floorboard. The mailroom was silent except for the faint creak of the wood beneath her and the soft patter of rain against the cracked window panes. The scent of salt and sea mingled with the mustiness of aged paper and dust. Elara's breath hitched as she gently pried the floorboard loose, revealing a cavity beneath. Inside lay a bundle of letters, their envelopes yellowed and fragile with age, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. Her heart quickened. These were more than just forgotten mail. They were pieces of the village's soul, trapped in time. She lifted the bundle carefully, the brittle paper crackling softly in her hands. The letters were addressed to various villagers, some bearing familiar names from the faded photographs in her grandmother Mara's collection. But most striking of all were the letters addressed to her, or rather, to her future self, penned decades before her birth. As she untied the ribbon, Elara's eyes scanned the elegant, looping script. The letters spoke of love, loss, hope, and despair, emotions raw and timeless. One letter in particular caught her attention, its ink smudged slightly as if the writer had paused to wipe away tears. The words painted a vivid portrait of Lydia's bright eyes and gentle smile, her desperate yearning to reunite with Thomas. The weight of the discovery was almost overwhelming. How many other stories had been lost beneath these floorboards? How many hearts had been broken or healed by letters that never reached their destinations? A sudden creak at the door startled her, and she looked up to see Ellie, the post office manager, stepping inside. His face was marked by years of weariness and regret, his eyes clouded with memories. "I wasn't expecting anyone," he said quietly, his voice low and reflective. "This place, it's been shut down for years. The mail system here, it's failed us all." Elara nodded, holding up the bundle. "I found these, beneath the floor. Letters that never made it." Ellie's gaze softened, regret flickering across his features. There were so many failures. Misplaced letters, lost parcels. The village's isolation didn't help. But these letters, he hesitated. They were more than just mail. They were pieces of people's lives, their hopes, their pain. Together, they spread the letters out on a dusty table, the faded ink revealing glimpses of a past the village had tried to forget. Elara felt a surge of responsibility. These letters were a bridge to the past, a chance to heal old wounds. As the rain tapped steadily against the windows, Elara clutched a letter close to her chest. The room seemed to hum with the unspoken stories held within those fragile pages. The silence of the village felt less oppressive now, replaced by a fragile hope that through memory and connection, the lost could be found. The discovery beneath the floorboards was not just a revelation of mail gone astray, it was a call to action. Elara knew that to honor the voices from the past, she would have to confront the village's silent history and bring these stories to light. Her hand lingered on the letters as she rose, determination settling like a quiet fire within her. The past was no longer just a shadow. It was a living thread woven into the fabric of her own story, and she was ready to follow where it led. But as she stepped toward the door, a sudden thought unsettled her. What else lay hidden in the village's forgotten corners? And how many more secrets awaited discovery beneath the northern rain? The mystery was far from over. The bell above the door chimed softly as Elara stepped into Ruth's shop, a small haven nestled at the heart of the village. The familiar scent of aged wood mingled with the faint aroma of dried herbs and spices, a comforting blend that immediately eased the tension coiling in her chest. Ruth looked up from behind the counter, her warm, weathered hands pausing in their task of arranging a row of jars filled with pickled vegetables. Her faded floral apron bore the marks of countless days spent tending the shop, and the loose bun of graying hair framed a face etched with kindness and years of silent observation. "Elara," Ruth greeted softly, her voice a soothing balm in the quiet shop. "It's been a while since you stopped by. How are you holding up?" Elara offered a tentative smile, tucking a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear. "Better now. I was hoping to ask you something about the village, the past. You know, the stories people don't often speak of." Ruth's eyes flickered with a mixture of caution and something deeper, perhaps sorrow or resignation. "Those stories have a way of staying buried," she murmured, her gaze dropping to the worn wooden floorboards. "But maybe it's time to dust off some of the old whispers." Elara pulled her small notebook from her coat pocket, its pages already filled with scribbled observations and reflections. "I found those letters," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The ones from Lydia and Thomas. They've been lost to the village for so long. I want to understand what happened, to give their story the voice it deserves." Ruth nodded slowly, setting aside a jar and leaning in closer. "Lydia was a bright light in these parts," she said, her tone tinged with reverence. "And Thomas, well, Thomas was a man caught between duty and dreams. But the war changed everything. The letters, they were meant to bridge the distance. But somehow they never reached their hands." Elara's heart tightened at the thought of love stifled by silence and lost time. "Why do you think no one talks about it?" Ruth sighed, fingers tracing the edge of the counter. "Because it's not just about lost letters. It's about pain, old wounds that never quite healed. Some folks here believe that digging up the past will only reopen those wounds. They prefer to keep the silence intact, to protect themselves from the grief that lingers in the rain-soaked streets." The rain outside intensified, tapping against the shop windows like a soft, persistent heartbeat. Elara glanced out, watching as the mist curled around the narrow lanes, swallowing the village in a gentle shroud. The quiet streets seemed to echo Ruth's words, a collective reluctance, an invisible barrier forged by years of unspoken sorrow. But silence isn't protection, Elara said softly, more to herself than to Ruth. It's a cage, and those letters, they deserve to be set free. Ruth smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope breaking through the veil of caution. You have a brave heart, Elara. Just be careful. Not everyone is ready to face the past. As Elara stepped back into the misty afternoon, the village felt both familiar and strange. The soft murmur of waves against the shore mingled with the hushed whispers of villagers passing by, their eyes averted, their steps hurried. It was clear that beneath the quiet surface, a river of emotions ran: deep fear, grief, longing, all intertwined with the story she was determined to unravel. That evening, in the solitude of her small cottage, Elara sat by the window, the dim glow of a single lamp casting shadows over her notebook. The rain tapped gently against the glass, a rhythmic reminder of the passage of time and the persistence of memory. She reread the fragments Ruth had shared, each word a thread weaving her closer to the heart of the village's silent past. Her mind drifted to the villagers' guarded expressions, the subtle glances exchanged in the square earlier that day. There was pain there, buried beneath years of silence and the weight of unspoken truths. Elara felt their hesitation as palpably, as if it were a physical barrier standing between her and the answers she sought. But with every whispered story, every cautious confession, the veil began to lift. The village was slowly revealing its secrets, one fragment at a time. Elara's resolve hardened. She would honor Lydia and Thomas by breaking the silence, by giving voice to the love that had been lost in the northern rain. It was a daunting path, fraught with resistance and sorrow, but it was one she was willing to walk. The past was waiting, and Elara was ready to listen. As the night deepened, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, and Elara closed her notebook with a quiet determination. Tomorrow, she would return to the village, to Ruth, to Mara, and to the memories that had shaped this place. The journey was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. And somewhere within the folds of those letters, within the echoes of the village whispers, lay the hope of healing and the promise of connection. The road ahead was uncertain, but Elara's heart was clear. She would uncover the truth, no matter where it led, and in doing so, perhaps find her own place within the story. As the rain whispered its secrets against the window pane, Elara allowed herself a moment of quiet hope. The letters had spoken to her, and now she would speak for them. But little did she know, the whispers of the village were only the beginning of a deeper revelation waiting just beyond the horizon. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Mara's kitchen window, casting soft stripes across the worn wooden table where Elara sat with a single, fragile letter in her hands. The paper trembled slightly beneath her fingertips, as if it carried the weight of the years it had waited to be read. Outside, the steady rhythm of rain pattered against the glass, a quiet accompaniment to the storm of emotions swirling inside her chest. "You've found something," Mara said softly, her voice breaking the silence as she poured tea into two mismatched cups. The familiar scent of chamomile filled the small room, wrapping around Elara like a gentle embrace. Elara nodded, her eyes fixed on the delicate handwriting flowing across the yellowed page. "It's from Lydia," she whispered, as if saying the name aloud would make the words more real. "But it's addressed to my mother." Mara's hands paused, the teapot hovering mid-pour. "Your mother." Her eyes met Elara's with a mixture of surprise and something deeper recognition, perhaps, or old sorrow rekindled. Elara swallowed hard, tracing the elegant script with a fingertip. The letter spoke of love held in absence, promises whispered across miles and years, a devotion unbroken by the cruel tides of fate. Lydia's voice, vibrant and aching, reached out from the past not just to Thomas, but to the woman who had raised Elara, binding their stories in unexpected ways. "I never knew," Elara murmured, the words tasting strange yet profound. "I thought the letters were just lost messages from a forgotten time. But this This is our history. Mara settled beside her granddaughter, her weathered hand resting gently on Elara's. Sometimes, the past waits for the right moment to reveal itself. And sometimes it's the only way to understand who we truly are. The discovery sent a ripple through Elara's thoughts. Questions that had lingered at the edges of her mind, now sharpened into urgent needs for answers. How deeply was she connected to Lydia and Thomas? What had her mother known? And why had this part of their family's story remained hidden for so long? Determined to uncover the truth, Elara rose from the table, the letter folded carefully into her notebook. She stepped outside, the village cloaked in the muted hues of the northern rain. The salty air was crisp, the sound of waves crashing against the rocky shore a steady heartbeat beneath the drizzle. Walking the familiar streets, Elara felt the past mingling with the present, the whisper of old secrets carried on the sea breeze, the echoes of footsteps long gone. Each step seemed to draw her closer to answers, yet the mystery deepened with every revelation. Back at Mara's cottage that evening, the two women sat together by the fire, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Elara read aloud from the letter, her voice steady despite the flood of emotions beneath it. Mara listened, her eyes shining with unshed tears and quiet pride. "It's more than just a story," Mara said when Elara finished. "It's a legacy, one of love, loss, and hope. And now it's yours to carry forward." Elara felt a fragile but fierce resolve settle within her. The letters were no longer mere relics of a forgotten past. They were a bridge connecting generations, a testament to the enduring power of love and memory. With this newfound connection, Elara's journey took on a deeper meaning, one that would challenge her fears and open her heart to the possibilities waiting beyond the horizon. As the rain continued to fall outside, washing the village in its quiet grace, Elara allowed herself a moment to dream of healing, of belonging, and of a future shaped by the secrets uncovered beneath the northern rain. The letters had found their way to her, not by chance, but by fate's careful hand, inviting her to write the next chapter. And so, with the past unfolding before her, and the promise of tomorrow shimmering like a distant light, Elara prepared to step forward. The story was far from over, and the secrets hidden in the letters were ready to reveal all they held if she was brave enough to listen. The journey ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, but for the first time in a long time, Elara felt the quiet stirrings of hope. A fragile bloom breaking through the rain-soaked earth of the village she called home. The letters were no longer just words on paper. They were the heartbeat of a love that had transcended time, and now they belonged to her. What will I find next? She wondered, the question lingering like the last note of a song, a call to discovery that echoed through the rain-drenched streets and into the depths of her soul. The secret connection was unveiled, but the story was only just beginning. The rain had softened to a persistent drizzle when Elara stepped into the village square, the familiar cobblestones slick beneath her boots. Her breath hung in the cold air as she tightened her scarf and scanned the gathering crowd. Faces were turned toward her, shadowed by the evening's gloom and guarded by years of silence. The murmurs that rippled through them were like the restless sea lapping at the shore, uneasy, hesitant, but impossible to ignore. She had expected resistance, but nothing prepared her for the weight of it, the collective reluctance that seemed to press down like the grey sky overhead. These were the people she had grown up among, yet now they looked at her as if she were an intruder disturbing a fragile peace. "Elara," a voice called from the edge of the crowd. It was Ruth, the local shopkeeper, her face lined with the stories of years, her eyes sharp and wary. "You're restirring things best left buried." Elara swallowed the sudden lump of doubt that rose in her throat. "I'm not here to stir trouble," she said softly, her voice steady despite the turbulence inside. "I just want to understand. The letters, they were part of our history, part of our story." A woman near Ruth crossed her arms, her gaze flickering with an unspoken warning. Some stories hurt too much to tell. Memories of the abandoned post office, the lost letters, and the silent streets pressed on Elara's mind. She knew she couldn't turn away, not now, when the past was reaching out to her with such urgency. Later, in the cramped warmth of Ruth's shop, the scent of aged wood mingled with dried herbs and the faint tang of salt from the sea outside. The shop was a sanctuary threaded with whispers of the village's past, and Ruth's guarded voice filled the quiet spaces between the ticking of the old clock. "I've seen those letters," Ruth admitted, her eyes flicking to the small bundle Elara had brought with her. "They belonged to Lydia, didn't they?" Elara nodded, opening her notebook to reveal her careful notes and sketches. "Yes, and Thomas. They were kept apart by the war, their love. It was never meant to be forgotten." Ruth's gaze softened, and for a moment, the sharp edge of reluctance dulled. "There are stories, things people don't want to face. But maybe it's time we did." Encouraged by Ruth's tentative trust, Elara visited Mara the next day. The kitchen was a haven of warmth and soft light, the silver-haired woman a steady presence amid the uncertainty. "You're stronger than you think, child," Mara said, pressing a cup of tea into Elara's hands. "These walls hold more than silence. They hold truth waiting to be told." Elara felt the weight of her grandmother's faith settle over her like a cloak. The fear of confrontation still gnawed at her, but Mara's gentle words gave her courage. Her next visit was to Jonas, the village historian, whose archives were buried in dust and shadow. The musty scent of old paper filled the cramped room as Jonas adjusted his spectacles and peered at the letters Elara laid before him. "The postal system failed them," Jonas said quietly, tracing the faded ink with a trembling finger. "Lost letters, lost time, lost love. But facts alone won't heal the wounds." Elara nodded, understanding that uncovering the truth meant facing pain, both hers and the village's. Yet, beneath the somber weight of history, there was a fragile thread of hope. With renewed resolve, Elara returned to the village square. The rain had ceased, leaving the air crisp and clean. Faces still held their wariness, but she no longer saw shadows of fear now. She saw the possibility of light breaking through. "I know it's hard," Elara began, her voice carrying across the quiet street. "But we can't let silence be our legacy. These letters, they read more than ink and paper. They're proof that love, memory, and truth endure." A silence fell, thick and expectant, before a few nods rippled through the crowd. It was not a victory, but it was a beginning, a crack in the silence that had held them captive for so long. Elara's heart pounded with the bittersweet mix of hope and fear. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer alone in walking it. The village's silent past was starting to speak, and she would be its voice. As the twilight deepened, Elara pulled her coat tighter and looked toward the horizon, where the last light of day kissed the restless sea. Somewhere beyond the rain and memory, she could feel the stirrings of change and the promise of a story waiting to be told. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Elara felt ready to face whatever truths lay hidden in the shadows. The rain had been falling steadily all afternoon, a soft northern drizzle that blurred the edges of the village and cast a muted grey wash over the cracked cobblestone streets. Inside the abandoned post office, Elara crouched by the loose floorboard she had pried open earlier that day, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached into the dusty hollow beneath. Her breath caught when her fingers brushed against the brittle edge of an envelope. The paper yellowed with age and fragile to the touch. Carefully, she withdrew it, holding the letter up to the pale light filtering through the grimy window. The handwriting was unmistakable, delicate and flowing, Lydia's familiar script, but this letter was unlike any she had read before. It bore no date, only a faint smudge of ink that suggested it had been written in haste and deep secrecy. Elara's heart pounded as she unfolded the letter, the scent of old paper rising to meet her, mingling with the faint salt of the sea breeze drifting through the open door. She settled onto the creaking wooden floor, the letter trembling in her hands, and began to read. My dearest Thomas, if fate has willed that our paths must diverge, I beg you to remember this moment, the last time our hands will touch. The last time our eyes will meet with the unspoken promises that filled the space between us. The war calls you away, and the sea claims your days, but know that my heart will sail beside you through every storm. We met in the shadow of the old lighthouse, where the waves crash endlessly against the rocks, a place untouched by time and witness only to our farewell. I fear the days ahead, uncertain and cruel, but I hold on to the hope that love, though tested by distance and silence, remains unbroken. If these words find you, know that I am waiting beneath the northern rain, beneath the skies that watch over our village, until we can be together again. Forever yours, Lydia. The words blurred before Elara's eyes, tears threatening to spill as the weight of Lydia's love and loss settled deep within her chest. This letter was the missing piece, the intimate confession that Lydia and Thomas had shared a secret final meeting at the old lighthouse. A place Elara had walked past countless times without knowing the story it held. She rose slowly, clutching the letter to her heart, and made her way to Mara's small cottage at the edge of the village. The old woman greeted her with a knowing smile, eyes soft but alert, as Elara entered and settled beside the crackling hearth. With Mara's gentle encouragement, Elara read the letter aloud, her voice wavering but steady. As each word fell into the warm room, the past seemed to awaken around them, the whispered hopes, the aching goodbyes, the enduring promise of love despite all odds. Mara reached over, her weathered hand covering Elara's, grounding her in the shared sorrow and hope that had defined their family's history. They loved fiercely, Mara said quietly, and even in their silence, their hearts spoke volumes. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters and carrying the scent of the sea into the room. Elara felt the storm within her mirror, the tempest outside, conflicting emotions swirling as the final letter reshaped her understanding of Lydia and Thomas's story. For the first time, she saw the depth of their courage, the sacrifices made in the name of love, and the cruel hand of fate that had kept them apart. Yet, beneath the sorrow, a fragile thread of hope glimmered, a promise that some loves were meant to endure beyond the boundaries of time and distance. As the evening shadows deepened, Elara stepped outside, the rain now falling softly around her. She stood at the edge of the village, the letter pressed close to her chest, and gazed toward the distant lighthouse, silhouetted against the dark sky. The steady drip of water from the eaves echoed the persistent rhythm of memory and longing that had carried her this far. In that quiet moment, Elara made a silent vow not only to honor Lydia and Thomas's legacy, but to open herself to the possibility of love and connection in her own life. The past, with all its pain and beauty, had become a bridge to the future. The letter's final words lingered in her mind, a whispered promise beneath the northern rain, forever yours. And with that, Elara stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever fate awaited her beyond the village's silent past. The rain had returned that evening, tapping insistently against the cracked window pane of the abandoned post office, as if urging Elara to make a decision long deferred. The bundle of letters lay spread across the worn wooden desk before her, each envelope a whisper from another time, each word a thread tangled in the tapestry of the village's silent history. Her fingers hovered over one particular letter, the paper soft and yellowed with age, Lydia's flowing script still vivid despite the years. Elara traced the delicate loops and swirls, feeling the weight of emotions contained within the hope, the heart-ache, the longing that transcended decades. A conflicted ache settled deep in her chest. The letters were more than relics. They were a mirror reflecting her own fears and desires. She had come seeking answers about Lydia and Thomas, the couple whose love had been lost in the folds of time and failed postal routes. But now, faced with the truth and the legacy they left behind, Elara realized she stood at a crossroads of fate herself. Would she remain tethered to the past, a guardian of memories better left undisturbed? Or would she dare to step forward, opening herself to the vulnerabilities and uncertainties of her own future? The soft creak of the door stirred her from her reverie. Mara, her grandmother, entered quietly, her silver hair catching the faint light. "Still wrestling with the past, my dear?" she asked gently, setting down a steaming cup of tea on the desk. Elara looked up, her eyes reflecting the storm both outside and within. "It feels like everything is asking me to choose," she confessed, "between holding on and letting go." Mara settled into the creaky wooden chair beside her, the scent of lavender and worn wool enveloping the room. "I know that weight well," she said softly. "There was a time when I thought if I clung tightly enough, I could keep the pain at bay. But love, memory, they are not chains, Elara. They are wings. They give us the courage to fly, even when the sky seems uncertain." Elara absorbed her grandmother's words, the warmth of the kitchen contrasting the cold rain outside. "But what if I'm not ready to fly? What if I fall?" "Then you fall," Mara replied with a small smile. "But you get up again. And sometimes you find that the fall was the beginning of something new." Later, under the soft glow of lanterns in the village square, Elara wandered the familiar streets now tinged with shadows of unspoken stories. The murmurs of villagers passed like a low tide, hesitant and wary, laden with the weight of memories they preferred to keep buried. She caught fragments of conversations, names whispered, regrets half hidden, the collective silence that had long obscured the truth. Frustration stirred within her, but alongside it grew a fierce determination. If the village could not face its past, she would carry it forward herself, not as a burden but as a beacon. Night deepened, and Elara returned to her small room, the quiet sanctuary where the world's noise faded to a whisper. Candlelight flickered against the pale walls as she opened her notebook, its pages worn from days of fevered writing and reflection. The pen trembled in her hand, then steadied as she began to write a letter to herself, an act of courage and hope, an embrace of the unknown. "To my future," she began, "I do not know what awaits me beyond these walls or beyond the shadows of the past. But I choose to believe that love, in all its forms, is worth the risk. I choose to step forward, to open my heart, and to live fully, even if the path is uncertain." Her breath caught as the words flowed, a quiet surrender mingling with a newfound strength. The rain outside softened to a gentle drizzle, as if the northern sky itself was blessing her resolve. In that moment, Elara felt the silence of the village shift, a long-held secret beginning to unfold like the petals of a fragile bloom. The letters had told their story, but now it was hers to write. And as the candle burned low, Elara knew that the crossroads of fate was not an end, but a beginning, a step into the delicate, uncertain dance of love and destiny. But what lay ahead was still veiled in mist, and the choices she made tonight would echo far, beyond the quiet coastal village, where the mail often never reached its destination. The question remained, lingering like the last note of a distant song. Would Elara have the courage to follow where her heart led, even if it meant leaving the safety of what she knew behind? The answer, fragile and fierce, waited in the dawn. The early morning mist clung stubbornly to the edges of the coastal village, weaving through narrow streets and curling around the aged, weather-beaten rooftops like a silken veil. Elara stood alone on the wooden platform of the train station, her fingers tightening around the worn leather strap of her small suitcase. The cold air was sharp, biting at her cheeks and setting a tremor in her breath that was made visible in the chill dawn light. She could hear the distant whistle of the train, an eerie, lonesome sound that echoed across the quiet harbor and mingled with the steady rhythm of the waves crashing softly against the shore. For months, the letters had consumed her thoughts, each word, each fragile fold a tether pulling her deeper into a story that was at once distant and intimately her own. Lydia and Thomas, names that had become etched into her heart. Their love, torn apart by war and silence, had mirrored the fractures she had long buried within herself. Now, standing on this platform, She felt as if she were standing on the edge of two worlds, the comfort of the village she had always known, and the uncertain promise of what lay beyond. Her grandmother Mara had been her anchor throughout this journey. The night before, in the quiet warmth of her cottage filled with the scent of brewing tea and aged wood, Mara had placed a gentle hand on Elara's shoulder. Sometimes, she had said softly, you have to open the door yourself. The past is a room you can visit, but the future, well, that's a path you must walk. Mara's silver hair shimmered in the flickering candlelight, and her eyes, full of wisdom and unspoken stories, held Elara's gaze with a steady reassurance. Elara had nodded, the weight of fear and hope mingling in her chest like the rainstorm gathering outside. Now the sky had turned a slate gray, heavy with rain clouds that threatened to burst at any moment. Elara pulled her coat tighter around her, the fabric dampening slightly as a few stray droplets kissed her skin. The scent of salt and wet earth filled the air, a reminder of the village's enduring presence, even as she prepared to leave it behind. As she waited, Ellie, the post office manager, appeared in the mist. His usual rugged expression softened when he saw her. "Heading out, are you?" he asked quietly, his voice rough from years of salty winds and unspoken frustrations. Elara gave a small, tentative smile. "I am. I need to see what's beyond these hills." Ellie nodded, the lines around his eyes deepening. "It's a big world out there, Elara. But remember, you carry this place with you, every letter, every story. Don't lose that." He reached out briefly, a rough hand brushing hers in a silent gesture of support before he turned away, disappearing back into the grey veil of the morning. The train's whistle rang again, closer now, sharp and insistent. The iron beast emerged from the mist, its wheels clattering against the rails with a steady, rhythmic pulse. Elara lifted her suitcase and stepped forward, the wooden platform creaking beneath her feet. She glanced back once, the village already beginning to fade into the mist, the familiar outlines of the post office, and the narrow lanes blurring like memories. Inside the carriage, Elara found a window seat and settled down, her notebook resting on her lap. She opened it to a blank page, the pen poised in her hand. The rain began to fall softly outside, tapping a gentle cadence against the glass, blurring the world into streaks of grey and silver. Her reflection stared back at her, a young woman caught between the echoes of a forgotten love and the uncertain promise of what was to come. As the train pulled away from the station, the village shrank into the distance, swallowed by the mist and rain. Elara's heart beat with a strange mixture of sorrow and exhilaration. The door to her past had been opened, but now she was stepping through the threshold into a future that was entirely her own to write. She thought of Lydia's bright eyes, of Thomas's earnest letters, and of Mara's quiet strength. And in that moment, Elara understood that hope was not the absence of fear, but the courage to move forward despite it. The journey ahead was uncertain, but it was hers. Outside, the rain whispered its timeless song, carrying with it the memory of love, loss, and the promise of new beginnings. The morning sun filtered softly through the lace curtains of the small sitting room, where Elara found herself seated, her fingers lightly tracing the worn fabric of a cushion. Around her, the walls were adorned with photographs, black and white faces smiling from decades past, a silent gallery of memories preserved through time. Across from her, a woman whose eyes shimmered with the weight of generations spoke gently, recounting stories of Lydia and Thomas with a voice thick with reverence and warmth. Elara's heart swelled with a mixture of awe and tenderness. Each anecdote breathed life into the letters she had pored over so many nights, transforming the fragile paper into living souls whose love and loss had shaped more than just a forgotten corner of the village's history. This meeting was a bridge connecting present to past, self to ancestors, pain to healing. Later, the village hall hummed with quiet anticipation. Elara stood before a small gathering, the bundle of letters clasped in her hands. As she read aloud Lydia's words, her hopes, her dreams, her unwavering love for Thomas, the room seemed to hold its breath. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the collective weight of unspoken memories. Slowly, soft murmurs rose, tears glistened in the eyes of neighbors who had carried their own burdens of loss and longing. In that moment, the village's long-held silence began to fracture, making way for remembrance and shared sorrow. After the gathering, Elara walked the rocky shoreline with Mara. The rain fell in gentle taps around them, a quiet symphony against the steady crashing of waves. The cool air mingled with the scent of salt and earth, grounding Elara as she reflected on the profound intertwining of past and present. Mara's steady presence beside her was a reminder of strength born from endurance, of stories passed down like precious heirlooms. The rain seemed to wash away the lingering shadows of isolation, leaving behind a fragile but radiant sense of peace. That evening, Elara found herself in the dim light of the village archives, surrounded by dusty ledgers and stacks of forgotten letters. Jonas, with his wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose, sifted through the records with meticulous care. Their conversation was intense yet hopeful. Each piece of history uncovered a fragment of a puzzle that slowly revealed the fuller picture of Lydia and Thomas's story. They spoke of missed opportunities, of love deferred by war and silence, but also of resilience and the enduring power of memory. As the night deepened, Elara felt a stirring within her, a quiet resolve fueled by the connections she was forging. The past was no longer a distant shadow, but a living thread woven into the fabric of her own life. Through these encounters, she began to understand that healing was not about erasing pain, but embracing it, allowing love and loss to coexist and guide her forward. The days that followed were marked by new meetings and conversations. Distant relatives shared family albums and heirlooms, old friends revealed forgotten tales, and the village itself seemed to awaken from a long slumber. Elara's guarded heart softened with each story told, each tear shed, each smile shared. She found herself no longer an isolated postwoman, but a part of a tapestry rich with history and hope. Yet amid the warmth, a lingering question remained: how would this newfound connection to the past shape her own future? The letters had opened a door, but beyond it lay choices that demanded courage and vulnerability. Could she, like Lydia and Thomas, dare to hope for love beyond the confines of fear and distance? As evening fell one day, Elara sat by the window, the northern rain tapping rhythmically against the glass. She opened her small notebook, the pages filled with reflections and discoveries. With a deep breath, she wrote, "Some loves are timeless, carried on the wings of memory and longing. It is now my turn to bridge the distance, to let the past guide me into the future." Outside, the village lights flickered softly through the mist. Elara's journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, she felt a stirring of hope, a promise that love, no matter how hidden or delayed, could still find its way home. And as the rain continued to fall, gentle and persistent, it carried with it the whispered promise of new beginnings, bridging time and hearts alike. The northern rain fell in steady, gentle sheets, draping the village in a misty veil that softened the edges of the world. Elara pulled her raincoat tighter around her as she stepped onto the old pier, the wooden boards slick beneath her boots. The sea stretched out before her, a grey expanse rippling with the rhythm of the rain, waves whispering secrets as they kissed the shore. She breathed in the briny air, the chill mingling with the warmth of her thoughts, and let the quiet melancholy settle around her like a familiar shawl. The letters had become more than just forgotten scraps of paper. They were voices from another time, echoes of love and loss that had seeped into the very fabric of the village. As the rain traced delicate paths down the weathered planks beneath her feet, Elara felt their presence beside her: Lydia's hopeful heart, Thomas's conflicted duty, Mara's steady wisdom, and her own growing courage. Turning away from the pier, she walked back toward the village, her footsteps muffled by the rain's steady murmur. The streets, usually so still, seemed alive tonight, the patter against cobblestones and rooftops composing a quiet symphony of remembrance. Her thoughts drifted to Mara's cottage, a warm beacon amid the damp chill. She was certain Mara would have words to offer soft truths to guide her through the tangled threads of memory and longing. Inside Mara's home, the fire crackled gently, casting flickering shadows across the walls lined with photographs and relics of a life deeply entwined with the village's history. Mara sat in her favorite armchair, a thick-knitted shawl draped over her shoulders, eyes bright beneath silver hair. The rain tapped softly against the windows, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the beating of time itself. Elara, Mara's voice was a comforting murmur. The rain, it's like the past washing over us, isn't it? Sometimes it feels like it never leaves, but it also clears the way for something new. Elara nodded, folding her hands in her lap. I think I understand now. The letters, they were more than stories, they were reminders that love doesn't simply disappear, even when time and distance try to drown it. Mara smiled gently. Exactly. Memory holds us. It shapes who we are and who we might become. But we must be brave enough to live beyond it, to let the rain cleanse what weighs us down. Later, alone in the abandoned post office, Elara sat by the rain-speckled window, the stack of yellowed letters spread before her like fragile treasures. The dim light revealed the elegant curves of Lydia's handwriting and the earnest script of Thomas. Outside, the rain fell softly, mirroring the tears she did not try to hide. Each drop was a testament to the pain of separation, the ache of what could not be, and the hope that endured despite it all. She traced a finger over a delicate line in one of Lydia's letters. Though miles may keep us apart, my heart is yours, across all time and distance. The words resonated deep within Elara, stirring a longing she hadn't expected to confront. Her own fears of abandonment, her guarded heart, felt suddenly fragile yet open, like the village beneath the rain. When the rain finally ceased, a soft light spilled through the clouds, and a faint rainbow arched over the rooftops, a silent promise painted across the sky. Elara stepped outside, the cool air fresh against her skin. The village seemed to breathe anew, washed clean but marked forever by the stories it held. In that moment, Elara understood that the rain was not an end, but a beginning, a symbol of the enduring power of love and memory, of the courage to face the past and embrace the future. She folded the letters carefully, a quiet resolve blooming within her. Tomorrow, she would open the door to new possibilities. As the village settled into a gentle hush beneath the fading rainbow, Elara lingered a moment longer. The northern rain still whispering its secrets in the air, promises woven between memory and hope, waiting to be embraced. Her journey was far from over. The rain tapped softly against the window pane, a gentle rhythm that matched the steady beat of Elara's heart. She sat quietly in Mara's kitchen, the warm glow of the hearth casting flickering shadows across the worn wooden table. Her hands gripped a chipped ceramic mug, the heat seeping into her palms, grounding her amidst the storm of emotions swirling within. "I'm afraid, Mara," Elara whispered, her voice trembling like the fragile flame of the candle between them. "Afraid that if I open myself up, if I let someone in, they'll leave. Just like everyone else has." Mara reached across the table, her weathered hand covering Elara's. "Fear of abandonment is a heavy burden, child," she said softly, her voice a bomb against the quiet thunder outside. "But it's only by being vulnerable that we truly live. Holding back keeps the heart safe, but it also keeps it locked away from the warmth it deserves." Elara swallowed hard, the words stirring something deep within. For years she had worn her solitude like armor, a shield forged by loss and distance. But now the letters, the stories of Lydia and Thomas, the village's silent past, they had cracked that armor, revealing the tender skin beneath. Later that afternoon, the sky darkened suddenly, and a swift summer rainstorm swept in from the northern sea. Elara hurried through the village square, the rain soaking her hair and clothes, a chill prickling her skin. She ducked under the awning of the post office, shivering, when a voice called out, "Elara, wait!" She turned to see Ellie, the post office manager, holding an umbrella. His weathered face broke into a warm, genuine smile as he stepped closer, offering shelter. "You'll catch your death out here," he said quietly. "Come on, let me walk you home." Something in his eyes, kindness, steadiness, made Elara's heart flutter uncertainly. She hesitated, then nodded, stepping under the umbrella. The rain pattered gently above them as they walked, the village around them softened by the mist and the scent of wet earth. Back inside the dim post office, Elara settled at the old sorting desk, her fingers tracing the edges of returned letters that had once been lost to time. The letters that had changed everything. Her voice was soft but sure as she spoke aloud, as if sharing a secret with the quiet room. "It's time to open my heart," she said, a fragile smile touching her lips, "to the past, to the future, and to the people who might still be here waiting." That night, by candlelight, Elara pulled her worn notebook close and began to write. Her pen moved steadily across the pages, capturing the day's revelations, the ache of longing, and the fragile hope blooming within her. She wrote of Lydia's bright eyes and Thomas's gentle strength, of Mara's unwavering support and Ellie's unexpected kindness. She wrote of rain that cleansed and connected, of memories that shaped her, and of the courage it took to embrace vulnerability. As the candle flickered low, Elara closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of fear lifting ever so slightly. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring new steps, new challenges, but also the promise of connection, of love that transcended distance and time. And for the first time in a long while, Elara welcomed the unknown with an open heart. The rain had been falling steadily since dawn, a soft, persistent drizzle that cloaked the village in a silver mist. As evening approached, Elara felt the weight of the day settle upon her shoulders. The letters, those fragile, ink-stained relics, lay carefully arranged on the wooden table in the village hall, their worn edges a testament to the years they had endured, unread and forgotten. The hall was filling slowly now. Villagers trickled in, their faces shadowed beneath hoods and scarves, the warmth of the gathering a stark contrast to the chill seeping through the old stone walls. Mara was among them, her eyes bright with quiet pride, sitting close to Jonas, who carried a leather notebook under his arm, his presence a reminder of the history within these walls. Ruth bustled about, offering cups of tea and biscuits, her soft smile a balm to the tension that clung to the air. Elara's heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and fear. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, wondering if the villagers would accept the story she was about to unfold, or if the silence that had long defined their home would swallow her words whole. But as she looked around, catching the tentative glances and the hesitant nods, she felt a fragile thread of hope take hold. Taking a deep breath, Elara stepped forward, the worn bundle of letters clutched tightly in her hands. The room quieted, the only sound the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the tall windows. She cleared her throat softly, then began to read. Lydia's voice, carried through time on delicate paper, filled the space between them. "My dearest Thomas, though the days stretch long and the nights grow cold, my heart remains steadfast. Every dawn brings a hope that this war will end, and with it, the distance that keeps us apart. I see your face in every sunrise, your laughter in the song of the sea. You are my anchor in this storm." Elara's voice faltered only once, overcome by the raw tenderness woven into Lydia's words. As she continued, the villagers leaned in, some closing their eyes, others wiping furtive tears from their cheeks. The letters told of love and longing, of dreams deferred and promises whispered beneath starlit skies. They spoke of a time when the village was vibrant, when hope was tangible, even in the face of uncertainty. When Elara reached the final letter, the one she had found last, a secret revealed that had been hidden for decades, the room was utterly still. Lydia's words spoke of a last meeting, a fleeting touch beneath the northern rain, and a vow to never forget, if fate should keep us apart. "Know that my love will cross any distance, endure any silence. In every rain that falls I will be there, waiting for you." As Elara closed the letter, Her gaze swept across the faces before her, faces marked by years of silence, of stories unspoken. Tears glistened in Mara's eyes, and Jonas nodded slowly, a quiet understanding passing between them. Ruth's gentle hand found Elara's, squeezing it with warmth. The spell of silence had been broken. After the reading, many stayed behind to share memories, to ask questions, to express the emotions that had long been bottled up. Elara listened, her own heart swelling with the realization that these letters had not only told a story, but had begun to heal a community. Later, stepping outside into the gentle northern rain, Elara stood alone for a moment. The droplets kissed her cheeks, cool and cleansing. The sea whispered in the distance, its eternal rhythm a reminder that life moved forward, carrying with it the echoes of the past. She thought of Lydia and Thomas, their love preserved against the odds, and felt a quiet resolve settle within her. The letters had shown her the courage it took to hold on, but also the strength found in letting go. Turning toward the village, Elara smiled softly, the rain mingling with the tears on her face. She was ready to step into her own story, to embrace vulnerability and connection with open arms. The letters hidden in the northern rain were no longer lost, they were alive, weaving the past and present into a tapestry of hope and enduring love. And as the rain continued to fall, Elara knew that she would never walk alone again.